Hi friends, today we are going to continue working on our 1-point perspective towns. Last week we drew our horizon line, we drew our sidewalk and made our sidewalk look three-dimensional, and then we drew these two lines to the top corners of our paper. These are going to be used for kind of measuring our buildings that we're going to be making on the right and then the trees that we're going to be making on the left. Now, yes, I'm going to be showing you how to draw trees, but if you want to draw more buildings on the left, you definitely can. I'm going to draw like a little park to the left, but you can take what we learned from the right and definitely add more buildings if you want to make your town look different. Now, be patient. Yes, this is a lot of work and there are rules to making 1-point perspective. Pause the video at any time that you need to get caught up. You can rewind it, play it again if you need to see it, okay? So please don't get frustrated. I am here to help you, and we are going to do this together. So the first thing we're going to do is we are going to be making the tops of our buildings, okay? So I am going to make a line, and I don't want to go to the line that we just measured because that's actually going to be for our roof. So I am going to make another line that comes down just a little bit lower than the line we created. So again, just like our sidewalk, I'm going to go from that vanishing point, that little point that we created, and I'm going to go a little bit farther down from that line here. Just a little bit. There we go. Okay, and I'm going to make a line. Now, guys, when I draw my lines, I usually try to press lighter. I'm pressing a little bit darker than normal just so that you guys can see better. But I would press on the lighter side because many of these lines are going to be erased because your buildings are going to be in front of it, or maybe they're just for measuring. Now that we have that line for the tops of our buildings, we're going to start with our vertical lines that go straight up and down. This is going to be for the sides and the front of our buildings. So the first thing we're going to be creating is the side of our first building. And so I am going to make a line that goes from that line we just drew down to our sidewalk. And I'm making sure that this vertical line is parallel to the line on my side of my paper here, okay? So it's going to be straight up and down. I'm going to make a line that goes from this line we just drew down to the sidewalk, okay? Now I'm going to make what looks like a rectangle by just making two straight lines that go out to the edge of my paper. Whenever we do this, it's going to be the sides of our building. So we're looking at it from the side. The fronts of our buildings are always going to have those angled lines. So that is the side of my first building, and you know what, just to show you that we're going to be erasing, I'm going to erase out that line inside that rectangle. Okay, so now that we have that, now we're going to make the front of our first building. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go from that line I just made, I'm just going to pull that line, making sure that that line is vertical straight up and down. And so depending on how wide you want to make your building, I'll make this one a little bit wider. They'll get smaller as we go back. Okay, and I am going to make a vertical line that goes from that line we just drew here down to my sidewalk. Okay, then I'm going to erase this line out again. Okay, so now this part looks like a box. Okay, so we've got the front of our buildings and we've got the side here. Okay, now we're going to make another building. We're not going to start our roofs till later. So now there's going to be a little bit of space in between this building. Again, the space is going to be a little bit smaller. I'm going to make a line that goes straight up and down from that line we just drew down to our sidewalk. And again, you want to make those horizontal lines that go from your building and then touch that building that we just finished. So again, we're starting with that rectangle. Erasing that line out. I'm going to make the front of my building here. So remember, the front of our buildings have the angled lines. And again, as I go back, these buildings are going to get smaller, so this front is going to be a little bit smaller than the last. I'm going to make a line that goes from the line we just drew down to our sidewalk. Do you see how I'm always using that same line? This top line is going to be for our roof. as I go, I'm erasing these lines inside of it because we won't be able to see that horizon line anymore because these buildings are going to be blocking it, okay? Now I'm going to make a little space in between again. We're going to make that rectangle. This rectangle is going to be a little bit smaller. Okay, again, I'm making those horizontal lines that go from the top of that line and then touch the side of the building here. Same here. And I'm going to erase that line out. Okay, now we're going to make the front of our building. Remember, they get smaller as they go back, so this one's going to be a little bit narrow. Go from that line down to our sidewalk and going to erase it out. Okay, do you see we have 3 buildings, 1, 2, 3. Where the angled lines are is the front, and where those rectangles are the little spaces in between. I think I have room to fit one more tiny building here. So again, you might have a different number of buildings depending on how wide or how narrow you made your buildings. Make that line go from that line down to our sidewalk, and I'm going to make 2 horizontal lines. Now I'm going to erase out that line. I'm erasing as I go so you can see that horizon line on the side is kind of disappearing. And now I'm going to make the front of this building. Again with that last line here. I'm going to erase it out. Now I could make one more building back here that's super, super tiny, but I think I'm going to stop here with those 4 buildings. If you want to do one more really, really tiny one, you definitely can, but I'm going to stop with 4. Okay? So now that I have my buildings, now I'm going to create my roofs. Okay? So that's why we're going to use this line at the top here. So I am going to, where this angled line is, I'm going to make a triangle. So I'm going to go up to that line at the top and then bring that triangle back down. Okay? Make that line go up, bring that triangle back down. Up and back down. Do you see how it touches the 2 sides of the front of the building here where it's angled? We don't want to go to the part where it's straight just yet. Okay? So this is the top of all my little buildings, those little triangles, right where we have those angles. Okay? Now from the very top of these triangles, we're going to make a straight line that goes from the top of the triangle that goes over to the side, and it goes off the paper. And I'm going to erase this little angled line because we don't need that anymore. Okay? Now this one, top of the building, I'm going to make a straight line that goes from the top of my triangle, straight line that goes over and stops at the side of my building. Again, I'm going to erase that out. So we're not making an angled line now, we're making a straight line that goes from the top of the triangle, goes over, I'll do it over here too. Top of the triangle goes over. You can see how tiny they get as they get closer to that vanishing point. And again, I'm going to erase that little angled line. That little angled line that we had drawn, that was just for the top of our buildings right here where the roof starts. Okay? So now we have our 4 buildings with roofs on. So now that we have these, guess what? We can actually erase this line too. We don't need this anymore because it helped us draw those roofs, but we don't need it anymore. That was just for measuring. You can see that's why we do a lot of erasing. This is for measuring. Okay. All right, now if you want to add any other details like little chimneys onto your houses, that's totally fine. The next part we're going to do is our doors. Now, I like to do this all in one go, so all my doors are the same height. That's up to you if you want to do them separately, but I'm going to show you. This is my trick. So, the tops of my door. I'm going to measure the top of my door to my biggest building because that's what matters most. Whatever the size of my top of my door is going to be here, it's going to get smaller, but it's going to be the same proportions as it is in this first building. Okay? Doesn't make much sense, but it will when you see it. Okay? I don't want to make this little teeny, teeny, tiny door. I want to be able to fit through the door, so I'm going to make it a little higher. And when I make my door, I'm taken my ruler, making sure that it is on the vanishing point, okay? And I'm angling it over. We don't want it straight because our doors are always going to be where there's an angled line. If you have an angled line at the top and bottom of your building, your windows and doors are going to have angled lines, okay? If you're making a door on the side of your building where there's rectangles and there's straight lines, your doors and windows can be normal rectangles and squares, okay? So I'm going to go from that vanishing point. I'm going to decide how tall I want to make my first door. So I'm going to make it go up a little bit here. Okay, and I'm going to make a line where my door is going to be, however wide I want that door to be. Then I'm going to make another one on my second building. Again, it's only going to be in the spaces that my angled lines in the fronts of my buildings are. Now, as I go back, those lines are going to get smaller because my door is not going to be as big. Okay, see how I lift that up? So when I made my lines, I made the tops of the doors, and do you see how the angle, all those lines go to the vanishing point? Now I'm going to make the sides of the doors. These are going to be straight up and down. They are not going to be angled. I know with all the angled lines, sometimes it's hard to make these straight up and down, but you just want to make sure that they're parallel to the sides of your building here. Okay, so I'm making these straight up and down. No angled lines for the side. Okay. All right, those are my doors, and if you want to add little knobs to your doors, you can. Little door knockers, little details, totally up to you. What else do you want to add? Okay, I'm going to leave mine blank for right now. I'm going to add details later. Now, I say we get the hard stuff done first. Since we just did the doors, let's do the windows in the front, okay? I'm going to make 2 windows on the front of my buildings. If you want to just make one, totally fine. Just like our doors, the top and bottom of our windows on the front of our houses, because there's an angled line at the top, angled line at the bottom, they are going to go to the vanishing point. The sides can be straight up and down, doesn't matter. So same thing, guess what? I'm going to make it easier on myself, and I am going to measure all my windows the same. Okay, so again, just like I did the doors, I'm going to make a line here for the top of my window, line here, line here, line here. Okay, so those are the tops of my windows. Now let's make the bottoms of my windows. Okay, sorry guys. Make this go up. And you know what you could do is before you make the bottoms, you could make the sides that go straight up and down so you know where you want to make that bottom here. So again, left and right, they're straight up and down. Top and bottom are go to the vanishing point. You're going to notice, do you see where the horizon line is? Your lines that need to be measured above the horizon line, they angle down, and those lines that we measure below the horizon line, they angle up. Okay? The closer you get to that horizon line, the more straight your lines are going to be. Okay, so now that I have the sides of my windows, now I'm going to do the bottom. So I'm going to take my vanishing point and I'm going to line it up with the bottom of my windows, and guess what? I'm going to do it all in one go. Make those bottoms measure to that vanishing point. Okay? All right, I'm going to do the same thing. I'm going to do another row of windows. Leave a little space in between. Window here. Window here. And again, if you don't want to do 2 sets of windows, you're like, Ms. Krasky, the first set was hard enough. Don't do 2 sets. See how as those lines get closer to that horizon line, they're going to get straighter. So it almost doesn't look like an angle, even though it still is. It's not perfectly straight. All right, so I made the sides of my windows going straight up and down. Now I'm going to make the bottoms. Again, they have to be angled. Always measure to that vanishing point. I'm going to make the bottom of the windows. Now, because this is below the horizon line, they're angling down. Okay, so those are my windows. Now, if I want to make those little, kind of that little cross in the middle of the windows, the middle line can be straight up and down. But guess what? The center line has to be measured to the vanishing point. So, I'm going to go to my vanishing point, and I'm going to do the middle of my windows here. 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay. And same with my second one here. I'm going to measure it to the vanishing point. This is so close to the horizon line that it's going to be almost straight. 1, 2, 3, 4. All right. I know, so many rules, but the perspective is correct. Okay? So now that we have our windows, now that we have our doors, guess what? This is the easy part. If you want to add windows and doors to the sides of your buildings or any little details, sometimes people do little trash cans in the little alleyways or do little doors. Everything can be drawn normally, okay? You can draw these windows just like normal rectangles and squares. And again, you can use your ruler. Sometimes I like to freehand these. You could do little windows here. You could do a little door kind of off to the side here if you wanted. It's up to you. Okay, so you can add those details in as you please. Okay, we're going to take a pause. We've done our buildings now, and those little details can come later. If you want to take a break and just add those little fun details, not worrying about measuring to the little point right there, that is fine, okay? So, the next thing we're going to do are the trees, and trust me, those trees are so much easier. All it is drawing trees, but getting smaller, okay? So we're going to take a quick break, then we'll return.